During the American Revolutionary War, the British had an army of only 300 soldiers. To increase their ranks, in 1775, Lord Dunmore released the Dunmore Proclamation that stated that any slave who escaped and fought for the British would be freed. They were also promised land and provisions for 3 years. Driven by the promise of freedom, many slaves escaped and made their way to British camps. When the war was over and the British had lost, the British soldiers, collectively called Loyalists, left for Nova Scotia. 3,548 Black Loyalists landed in Halifax between 1783 and 1784. Over half of the Black Loyalists settled in Shelburne County, mainly settling in Birchtown, named for Samuel Birch, who signed their freedom papers. Each Loyalist was promised 100 acres of land, plus additional acreage for each family member. Unfortunately, with such a large influx of immigrants, the matter of receiving land was difficult. White Loyalists took precedence over their black counterparts. When Black Loyalists did receive land, sometimes after waiting years, they received a significantly smaller amount of land than they were promised. Furthermore, the land they received was rocky and not suitable for crops. Most Black Loyalists could not afford to have their land surveyed and therefore could not build on it. They had to dig holes to live in order to survive the winter months. Life for the Black Loyalists was far from the promised land they envisioned. While the Black Loyalists were free, there were still many enslaved Africans in Nova Scotia, and for the white citizens, there was no difference between a free black and an enslaved one. Furthermore, Birchtown was a haven for escaped slaves who could hide from their masters among free blacks. This upset white citizens who felt they were losing their property. Furthermore, Black Loyalists were paid a quarter of the wages of a white man, and so employers were more likely to hire blacks as a source of cheap labor. This angered white citizens as they felt they were stealing their jobs. Those who could not find jobs were forced to become indentured servants. Some Black Loyalists were even kidnapped and sold into slavery once again. David George, a Black Loyalist and Baptist preacher, founded a church in Shelburne shortly following his arrival in Nova Scotia. He attracted both white and black churchgoers. Tension started to grow when George began baptizing white citizens, and came to a head when he baptized a white woman. On July 26, 1784, 40 disbanded white Loyalists tore down George's home and about 20 homes of Black Loyalists in the area. The Shelburne riot is considered the first race riot in North America. George continued to preach, but the white Loyalists returned and beat him with sticks, chasing him into a swamp. The rioting continued for 10 days, with trips into the black communities lasting into August when soldiers were dispatched to deal with the issue. As a result, a dusk-to-dawn curfew was issued for all black citizens, and the Black Loyalists were now completely left out of land deals. The victims of the Shelburne riot were being punished. Soon after, a famine forced many Black Loyalists to become indentured servants, a form of slavery in which a person would enter into a contract to work for several years in exchange for housing and rations. Jesse Robertson, who wrote an article about the Shelburne riot, notes that, quote, "The conditions were startlingly similar to the slavery from which they had escaped," end quote. Unfortunately, as many Black Loyalists could not read, some were tricked into signing contracts that once again bound them to a life of servitude. Fed up with their mistreatment, Thomas Peters was sent to London in 1790 with a list of grievances. There he met the Sierra Leone Company, a group of abolitionists who established a colony of free slaves in Africa. Peters returned to Nova Scotia, offering free transportation to Sierra Leone with the help of the company. However, employers, worried about losing their source of cheap labor, began spreading rumors that it was actually a ploy to re-enslave the Black Loyalists. People also began demanding proof that those who wanted to leave were free blacks and debt-free. In some cases, fake documents were printed to keep them from leaving. Despite this, 1,196 Black Nova Scotians accepted this offer and set sail for Sierra Leone in 1792. While life in Nova Scotia was far from ideal, some of the Loyalists decided to stay. There are some surnames shared across the continents. The Wises, my family, as well as others such as the Hamiltons, have members in both Sierra Leone and Nova Scotia. While our ancestors took different paths, we share a history of bravery and hardships.